You're righty there, fellow mini painters and lovers of all things Oldhammer related, and welcome to another video from Nostalgiahammer Hobbies. This video is a bit later than I would have liked it to have come out, so for that I do apologise. But considering that we're coming up to the time of year when the ghosties, ghoulies and everything goes bump in the night is coming up, I might just have the perfect model to hopefully make up for this. So, grab yourself a cushion or something to hide behind, and let's go delve into the realms of everything that goes bump in the night. On the third night of fighting, the orcs took the great bastion from us. Despair settled in our hearts, for all hope of rescue was now gone. Of all our company, I counted but 37 living, and of these, but 25 unhurt. The orcs gathered about us in the darkness. The screeching and the cackling of their Gretchen haunted us as they mustered to the attack. An hour before dawn, I called the company to prayer and, since our chaplain was slain, we made our peace with the Emperor in battle fashion. It was as I raised my eyes from prayer that I saw a strange host where moments before there was nothing but darkness. At first, I thought it was some connivance of the orcs, but as the host advanced, I realised it was of Space Marines, though not of any chapter under the Emperor's sun. Their armour was coloured black, and upon it was drawn chilling images of bones and fire, and on their helms they bore skulls. As they advanced, an eerie glow shrouded them, and fire seemed to dance about their feet. Like the bones of men in the torment of purgatory they were, so that they looked more like skeletons than living men, yet no sound did they make. For a while, I believed this to be some phantasm, a vision of ancient times, for I had heard that the Emperor grants such sights to those of his warriors who face death in his name. But it was not so, for soon the ghostly warriors reached the orcs' battle line, and suddenly the air was full of battle din, and the orcs were wailing and crying in their terror. We that remained watched the dark battle brothers at their work, and never before or since have I seen fighting such as I witnessed that dawn. Seizing the moment, I regrouped my company and led them to war, yet there was little work left for us, for the orcs lacked stomach for the fight. Soon we secured the great bastion once more, and without further loss. Of the Dark Brotherhood there was no sign. And here is this rather special miniature. Firstly, I would just like to say thank you very much to Jason from Bring About Wargaming for sending me this to paint. This is a model that I remember very much from my childhood when it was actually released, and I've always wanted to give one a go because I missed it at the time. This model is, as you can see, the Sargent Centurius model for the Legion of the Damned. Now this was a limited edition model that was released all the way back in 1996, I believe, and they actually announced it back in White Dwarf 195 for the March edition. And when you look in it, you start off, starts off with this absolutely beautiful centerfold page spread just here, which opens out announcing it, and you can see the model that's going to be released right up there. That's it in its fully painted form. It's really lovely. When you go through the White Dwarf, you can get the page. So look, here he is. There we go. You got a lovely article. I mean, Captain Dante and Tycho, but that's irrelevant, so we shall struggle to ignore the Blood Angels. When you read the White Dwarf, it goes through and it shows off how he was, they came up with the ideas for him and the sculpting of him, not to mention this really lovely, another painted example of him down here. When you turn over the page, you have the rules. It goes through and it's got a lovely little bit of fluff and story, all describing the Legion of the Damned, which back in the second edition hadn't really had much of fluffing out done to him yet. I believe that happened around third edition. Don't quote me on that one, I'm pretty sure. Now, there's one bit I have noticed when we get down to the rules here, and it says that he always has the Animus Malorum. You look up here, it says 40 points for that, but I have a War Gear card for it. I'm not sure where the War Gear card came from, but this only says it's 35 points for that particular bit of War Gear. And I'm not sure which one you would follow. My gut would be to follow the initial entry in the White Dwarf, but maybe you would follow the War Gear card. Maybe put in the comments below and say which one you would think to follow. And also, if anybody knows where you actually got this War Gear card. Because it is a proper Games Workshop one. See, it's all like the proper cardboard. So it's not one that somebody's printed out from anywhere. I'm just not sure where it comes from. The one bit in the rules that I did find very interesting that I didn't know is, though, that you can actually give him his own bodyguard. That's 196 points for that, and that gives you 4 Legion of the Damned legionaries with Centurius. And apparently they can also add extra weapons, assault weapons, and what else have we got here? Up to 1 model in the squad, not Centurius, may be equipped with a weapon from the special weapons section of the war gear list. And any model may be equipped with weapons chosen from the assault weapons section of the war gear list. You can give them all crack grenades, brief, you can give them all melter bombs as well, but you cannot give them jump packs. Oh, okay. I love the fact that they cause fear and are immune to all psychology. At this point as well, I don't believe that the sculpted Legion of the Damned models have been released yet. The reference material that I can find for actual Legion of the Damned models is in the Ultramarines Codex from the 2nd edition 40k's time. And that's got a unit in there that's been painted up with the bones and the flames on there. So the actual sculpted ones, again, I don't think came out until around about 3rd edition. I always remember them being really, really lovely models. And when you read the Animus Speculum rules, this thing is really quite a tasty weapon. Use it during the psychic phase. I mean, it only does have a short range of 12 inches, but you probably will be getting your Legion of the Damned right up there to deal with your opponents. And you can use up to 3 force cards to power it. Then again, you've got big leadership, so I'd imagine you would probably be using at least 2 minimum. You're probably going to want to be putting 3. And then it completely ignores all wounds and armour. I'm not sure if that means it ignores fields as well. I would imagine so, but I'm not too sure. What makes it even better is that if you do use this piece of war gear and kill an enemy model with it, you can bring back one of your Legion of the Damned models as well, which would be a real kick in the teeth for your opponent. The one thing I would say is I would possibly replace his chainsword with a power sword, though. Although, would you replace it or just add to it? Because he comes with the chainsword, so if you give him a power sword as well, that means he's got 2 swords, 2 parries. Oh, that might be a way to go. Give him a power sword and a chainsword. Because he says Centurius may buy additional weapons from the assault weapons and grenade section of the war gear list. So yeah, you could quite happily give him a chainsword, give him the chainsword that he comes with, as well as a power sword to go with it. You should bring along a unit of 10 Legion of the Damned, as well as Centurius and his bodyguard of an extra 4 Legion of the Damned. That would definitely be a force to be reckoned with. Ballistic skill 5, weapon skill 5, toughness 4. 1 attack though. And causing fear is always quite nice as well. One day I might have to use a unit of Legion of the Damned in with my Blood Angels. Unit of Legion of the Damned going up the Unit of Death Company could be extremely useful. I never actually used Legion of the Damned back in the day. In fact, I don't think I've ever used Legion of the Damned. I'm wondering, did anybody else use them? Did anybody else just use units of Legion of the Damned as allies in their armies when they were playing games? So I don't actually remember seeing it done very often, to be honest. I'm very interested to hear if anybody did do it. And if so, how well did they work out for you? With that, we are going to go and have a look at this model and actually open him up. Right, now, let's open this bad boy up. Look at that. So you've got his base. The actual model itself. Okay. There we go. Very shiny. Very new out of the box. Needs a little bit of cleaning up, obviously, but not too much, actually, to be honest. And then you got the good old banner with backpack with banner, as well as his chainsword, which you could replace with a power sword if you wanted to. And the legendary piece of foam. Oh, love it. And building this guy is going to be a relatively simple process. Just going to have to snip the little tab off and then glue it into the arm socket there, and then scrape some of the mould lines off. And look for these tiny little bits that are just hiding on his feet, just there. I've got a pair of GW snips, old pair, just in case you damage them. And I'm just going to snip this little bit off. Keep these little bits if you have any airbrush paints or anything like that, or contrast paints. speed paints, anything like that, because these bits, if you actually put them in the bottles of paint, work great as shakers. They don't corrode as far as I know, so we'll put that to the side. And I'll get my set of needle files. I'm going to use the diamond triangular one here to begin with. I'm just going to find these mould lines. You get them just across the legs like that. There you go. And just file this off. You can scrape them off as well. Okay. And there's a little bit on the. We've got a little bit on the end of the toe here. And there's a bit on the inside of his leg as well. We're just going to go around and we're going to take all of these off. And it is just a case of going around and doing this over the entire model, looking carefully for any that you can find. Be quite sneaky and hide somewhere. And here we have him so far. Glued his chainsawed arm into place. I'm thinking there's going to be a little bit of gap filling on there. We have his backpack here, and it's the backpack with the banner pole on it. Now Centurius is depicted without a banner pole, but these banner poles, usually you find if you get second-hand models, have been snapped off and they've long gone. Now I do want to use this backpack because it's a period authentic backpack, but I don't want the banner pole on it, and I have a plan for it for later. Instead of cutting it, like snipping it off, I'm going to use one of these, a razor saw. And I'm going to cut it off as carefully as I can from this and keep it for later. So I just thought I'd show that being done quickly. Just gently. There you go. I can keep that for later. And then where he's been cut off, we then just take our needle file and smooth it off. Here's another one I can show you. So you'll notice when you put the backpack on that it doesn't quite go down properly. And this is quite a common problem. You'll find that the metal nub to put it on is just a bit bigger. Now you can try and file this down and shorten it down. Or another thing you can do is if you have a Dremel, get some of these. This one's covered in all sorts of metal, so I've used it to grind down metal as well. You get these stone grinding bits, and if it's a bit big, you can just put it into the hole and just grind it a little bit bigger. I'll show you. Okay. See how this fits on now. I want to make it a bit deeper. You get different sized birds that you can use for this. Then you just carefully go in until you think it's about right. A bit better, but still not quite there. I think what I'm going to do now is I am actually going to shorten this off. Good thing is you can use these bits to do that as well. Even with this ball bit that I'm using here, so here you go. Yeah, I'm a lot happy with that. That sits on a lot nicer. So then, finish off the building, and we're only going to want a tiny bit of super glue on here because we don't want to glue this backpack on properly. And I'll show you why in a bit. Use the tiniest bit of super glue on the end, on that bit there, like that, like barely enough, you know. And then touch some of that off, and then put your backpack in place. Hold it where you want it, and there you go. And then we're going to prime model up, and we're going to be doing that in my high coat matte black. To begin with, I've primed it in the high coat matte black that I like. And to go on from this, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take some Abaddon black and I'm just going to paint it all over this, just to try and knock a little bit of the shine off it that seems to have acquired, and just make sure it's every little detail's covered in and filled in. And it doesn't matter what brush you use for this, you can use any brush you like. I'm using a GW's synthetic shade brush, medium shade brush. And we're just going to go over the whole of it like this and just make sure we've got it in there everywhere. We've got the paint thinned down as well. And there we go. He's all primed up in Abaddon black. And I've also separated the backpack from him. This is going to make it easier for me to paint the detailing around the back of it, sort of thing, of him as well. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to take a leaf out of another YouTuber's book, and his channel is Miniscapes. If you haven't heard of him, I'll leave a link to his channel below in the description. He's got some great Warhammer 40k second ed content. I highly recommend his channel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a little bit of Cantor blue in with the Abaddon black. And I do mean a very little bit. You want the tiniest little bit of a blue tint to the black. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint it over all of the areas that should be his armour. And I'm going to miss anything else. So I'm not going to do the joints between the arm panels. I'm going to leave those Abaddon black. But everything else, all of his armour, is going to be painted in this very, very dark blue. For this, what I'm using is a size 0 green stuff world paintbrush. I'm just going to go around and carefully pick out all of the bits that are armour. And if you happen to have issue 195 handy, you'll be able to look at some reference material. So they've got a lovely couple of pictures in there of him painted up. And you'll be able to work out exactly what is supposed to be black armour and what isn't. So I'm going to go around picking out all of these details, and then we shall be back when that is done. And there we go. The difference is very subtle, but it is there nevertheless. When you come to highlighting it and highlighting the different areas, it'll become just that little bit more obvious then. The next colour I'm going to be base coating is all of the actual bone parts. So that's going to be like the sculpted on leg bone here. You've also got the skulls around here. You've got the skull in his hand, as well as these ribs that are on here, and this skull that's on the back here. Also, there is the skull part to his helmet. I'm still using my size 0 green stuff world brush, and I'm just going to go around and carefully base coat all of these, and I'm going to be using Xandri dust for this, and we shall be back when all the bone details are based up ready. And there we have all the bone areas done. The next thing we are going to do is going to do a couple of brown areas. The first one is this little cord around his wrist. For that, I'm going to be using Mornfang Brown. I'm still using my size 0 green stuff world brush, and just try and pick this out as carefully as you can. And then after that, it is going to be Rhinox hide, which I'm going to be doing on his weapons holster. But we're only going to be doing the inside part of this, where the line is, the detail there. I'm going to leave that outer edge to do a different colour. There are also, just in there are a couple of pouches on his hip. These we are also going to be doing in Rhinox hide. The next colour we are going to base coat in is we are going to do Mephiston red, and we are going to do it on the edge of his weapon holster, so all around here and all around this line here. And he has also got a couple of little details. So he's got a little detail just up in there on his back, which you can see in the artwork. Got a little button just here, in there, and there is also one up on here. And for the weapon holster, it is just a case of going around as careful as you can and painting in that edge. After that brighter red's been done, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to paint the eye lenses of his helmet. For that, I'm going to use a darker red. So in the picture, it looks like they're almost black, but I'd like a little bit of a hint of colour to them. So what I'm going to use is corn red for this, because it's a more of a flatter, darker red. And I'm just going to carefully try and pick out the actual centre of this while still leaving a black outline in there. I know this does look quite stark now, but it will darken off as it dries. Next up is that there's a couple of little green areas to do, just a couple. One of them is this little wire that's just here, and I'm going to paint these in Caliban green to begin with. And there's a little one tucked away just in here in his neck, next to that red one. We've also got his grenade. Now what I'm going to try and do is pick each of these squares out on this and leave the black line still visible. And to do that, I'm mostly just going to dot the green onto there. And there are a couple other bits of green just here, but we'll be doing those later on. You'll see why. Next up, we are going to highlight the white skulls. So that's the one there, and the two on his knees. For that, I'm going to start by using Ulthwan Grey. This is a slightly bluey off-white, which is going to be hopefully just about right for this. Now this is going to need a couple of coats to get it to be full opacity. That's fine. After that, the next part I'm going to be base coating is his head. And for that, I'm going to be using Pallid Witch Flesh. Basically, try and leave his mouth black if you can. Other than that, you just want to try and get a nice smooth coat of this all over his head. And just build this up over a couple of coats until you achieve a nice smooth coverage over it. Go, that is his head base coated up. Next up, I'm going to be doing the metallics, and there's a couple of little gold areas. Just around here, we've got a little skull that's just around here on his wrist, on the cord, as well as a little, I don't know what it is, little bauble thing, which I'm also going to do gold, because I'm not too sure, looking at the box art, or the picture rather, what it is actually supposed to be. I'm just going with my gut instinct and do it as a little gold fetish. There's only two little bits of gold. And then for pretty much the last base coat, we are going to be doing all the metallic areas, all the gunmetal areas. And for that, I'm actually going to be using Iron Warriors. And it's a darker metallic than Lead Belcher. And I think this would work quite well on something like this, once it's been highlighted up. So for that, what we're going to be doing is the teeth on the chainsword here. We've got the hilt of the chainsword as well. Got the engine on the back of his chainsword. I'm going to do this colour. As well as you've got the handle of his pistol. You've got the tops and bottom of this grenade here. As well as you've got these little tiny hoops on his brown wrist cord. We're going to go around and pick all of those out and come back when these are done. Now that we've got pretty much all the base colours done, it's going to be time for some washes. To start off with, I'm going to be using Nuln Oil, which I'm going to put on all the metallic areas, and I'm also going to do it on his bluey black armour. I'm not going to drown it or anything else like that. I'm just going to guide it towards the recesses and use it to help to tone down that slightly bluey tint that it's got. Just add a little bit more definition into the recesses. After that wash, the next one I'm going to use is Agrax Earthshade, and I'm going to put that over all of these bony areas. I'm not going to do it on the white bone areas, and I'm not going to do it on his face. I am also going to do it on the brown leather part, so that's the pouches and his weapons holster. The next areas I'm going to do on this miniature are the red areas, and for that I'm going to be using Carabird Crimson. There aren't very many red areas on this. We've only got the round the weapon holster, and there's a couple of cables and red, I don't know what you call them, buttons that are on his armour. After that, I'm just going to do these couple of little gold areas that's on the model. And for that, I'm just going to be using Reikland Flesh Shade. After that, we're going to start washing the areas like his face and his skulls, and we're going to start with his face. For this one, because I want a sort of a grey tint to his skin, I'm actually going to use contrast paints and ordinary GW washes for this. And what they are going to be is a mix of Basilicanum Grey and Reikland Flesh Shade, about 50-50, as well as thin it down with about an equal amount of contrast medium. And what I'm going to do is I'm just paint it over the whole of the face and just kind of guide it into the areas where I would like there to be some more shadow, so in the more sculpted detail around his head and around his face. And then to follow on to that, to add a sort of a purpley tint to it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tiny bit of Druchii Violet, probably about one drop to compared to what you've done, so a small little bit until you get a slight purpley tint with it. And then I'm just going to guide that into the specific areas I want it, so that would be around the eyes and his little wrinkles on his forehead. And what this is going to do is help to add that sort of definition and added interest to these areas, like you can see in the artwork in the White Dwarf. And if you just make sure you keep it thinned down a little bit as well, so still make sure you've got your equal parts contrast medium in there, or a little bit of waterworks just as well at this, and so that way the colour isn't too stark. You just guide it in there, it's not too bad, and it helps to add that nice little bit of definition. The final one I'm going to do is going to be the white skulls that are on his knees and on his groin area. For that, what I'm going to use is another contrast paint, and that will be Talisar Blue. And that I'm thinning down a lot, like probably about 7 parts contrast medium to half a part Talisar Blue. Very, very thin mix. This is actually a very, very vibrant contrast paint. I'm just going to try and guide that down again into the sort of sculpted detail where you want it to be a bit stronger. As well as I'm also going to do these little white fetishes on his wrist thing. And with that one done, that is actually the last of the washes that we want to be doing. Now we've got all the base colours down and the washes down, we're going to be moving on and going and do some highlights. And I'm going to be starting off with the black armour, where we've got the slightly bluey tint to it. For that, I'm going to start with an edge highlight of Thunderhawk Blue. For that, I'm just going to thin it down. If you make it nice and thin, get your consistency right, it helps it to flow off the bristles nicely on the brush. And I'm still going to be using my size 0 from Green Stuff World. And I'm basically just going to pick out all of the edges of the armour panels as carefully as I can. Just going to work around slowly and picking all of these out. Okay, and where this is a special character, we are going to try and pick out as many of the edges as we can actually get to, even if you can't see them, because it's a special character, so it deserves the attention. And just take your time with it, and you'll be there finished before you know it. And there we go, that is all of the Thunderhawk Blue done. Now this is the longest part of the edge highlighting you're going to have on this model. It takes quite a while. But from this point onwards, the highlights get less and less, and it's quite a bit quicker to do it. The next colour we're going to be using is Rust Grey, and this one is going to cover much less area. We're going to use it to cover up, go onto the higher points of it. So, for example, I'll show you here. On this part of the armour joint here, do it just there, but leave the recess of it darker. That's still that Thunderhawk, and then add this as thin as you can on the top part, but don't go all the way around with it. There you go, so just there. And this top part here, we can do similar. Leave it in the darkest recess, and then just go round, and there we go. I'll show you again on this, on the same hand. Go on this part here, Barry's holding his hand up. I'm going to do just there again. Leave the recess dark, the deepest part of it dark. And there you go. And you've got the corners here. We're going to do the whole little corners like this. That's going to go to about there. There we go. And we're going to do just a tiny bit of the internal corner as well. There we go. I'm going to go around all the edges and do the upper parts of them, and I'll come back and I'll show you what it looks like when that's done. And with the Rust Grey highlights done, that black armour is starting to pop quite nicely. The final stage for the highlighting of the black armour that I'm going to do is Fenrisian Grey. And with this one, it's pretty much a case of actually less is more. What you want to do is you want to aim for the very top corners of the armour, really. So just this little spot just here, and then any other spots that you can find which are just on the very tips and almost on the the uppermost edges of it. And that way what it'll do is help to add that hint of it actually being reflective and shining light back off the armour. And remember, with this one, it is very much a case of slightly less is actually more. You just generally have fun, pick out the areas where you think the light would reflect most, and go for those. And then we have the completed bluey black highlights done. The next highlights I'm going to do is going to be the actual pure black, and that's going to be the jointing between his armour, the top edge of his chainsword, as well as the cabling here. To start with, what I'm going to use is Mechanicus Standard Grey, but that is only going to go on the top edge of the chainsword and the joints between his armour, not on the cabling on the middle of his stomach or there, just here and here. I'm still using my size 0 Green Stuff World. Now for doing these bits in here, I'm afraid to say there is no other way of doing it other than being very carefully. If you do the lines vertically, so top down, and just go in as careful as you can and try and pick them out. If you do make a mistake, it's not the end of the world, because you can just go in with some pure black and tidy it up. It also helps if you thin your paints down just that little bit for these bits, because it will help the paint flow off the tip of your brush. There we go. The top of the chainsword, it's nice and easy. You just run the paintbrush along the edge of it. I shall be back when I've done all of the joints in their armour. And there we go. So that's all of the grey parts in between their armour done, and the top of his chainsaw done, as well as the little bits just around the back. Now the next one I'm going to do is Dawnstone, and that is going to go on slightly less of these. So similar way to how we did the blue armour. This lighter grey is just going to be done towards the more uppermost areas of this trunking or jointing, whatever you call it, like that. And then on this cabling on his stomach, carefully pick out the ridges top. You don't have to pick out all of it. So like that. I should be back when that's done. So now to finish off this grey, what we're going to go to is Administratum grey. On the cabling here on his stomach and under his arm, we're just going to do a tiny little point highlight just on the centre to make it look like it's reflective. And then on the cabling in between his arms and his armour joints, we're just going to do the very uppermost part of it. And again, just a tiny little line of it. There we go. We should be back when I've done that. And with that, the grey joints done, that is actually the biggest parts of the highlighting done on this. So the next thing I'm going to do is start highlighting the couple of browns we've got. And I'm going to start with a little strap around his wrist. And for that, the first colour I'm going to be using is Scrag Brown. And I'm just going to try and, as carefully as I can, just like sort of tap the brush along the edge of it, sort of thing, to add that hint of texture to it. Like that. And again, I'm still using my size 0 green stuff. And then the next one from there is going to be Deathclaw Brown. This one is going to be done in a similar way, but only in the very topmost parts of it. So here, like the uppermost parts, just here, like a couple of little dots of it going around, and the same on the other side. And then the final brown to highlight is the darker brown on his weapons holster and on these two little pouches that are hiding in there. The first one I'm going to use on that is going to be Gorthor Brown. And again, for this one, I'm afraid it is just going to have to be very careful when you trace the outline line of here. I'm still using my size 0 green stuff. And again, try and be vertical, drawing your brush in a vertical line down towards yourself. And you don't have to aim to get it a perfectly dead, single line. You can, sort of just sketch it in, sort of thing, as long as you're careful. And across the uppermost edge of this holster, instead of doing it in a solid line, again, try just tapping the brush across it, so it does a sort of intermittent line on there, because that will add the impression of wear. And then the final colour to use is Baneblade Brown. And that's just going to be a tiny little bit, just along into the little corners here, a little bit there on the clasp, and some even fewer dots across the top here. And then on these weapon pouches here, just a couple of little selective dots just in the corner, just so it helps to sort of show that they're there, because they're quite hidden away. After those browns, I'm going to start doing the few little red areas that we've got. And to begin with, I'm going to go back in with Mephiston Red and just brighten up these little corners. So you've got these little ones just around the edge here of your weapon holster. So if you go in carefully, try and pick out the edge, bring it back up. And then we've got these couple of little power points, just the one tucked in just there, the one just there. We've got this little plug, or wire rather, going around the back of his head. What we're also going to do is we're going to put a little bit of this Mephiston Red in the eye sockets here, which we've done in Corn Red, because this is a fraction brighter, so it will brighten these up a bit. But he hasn't got this helmet on, so we don't want it to have the sort of glowing look. It's not been activated. And then the final red highlight I'm going to go to is Evil Sun's Scarlet. And on this weapons holster here, I'm just going to do it on little bottom corners, as well as the corners on the top flap. After I did the red, I highlighted the green. And unfortunately, I didn't realise that my camera had switched off. So what I did was initially went in over the green cables with some warpstone glow and picked them out there, as well as on the little grenade that he's got on his hip here. To finish it off, what I did was some moot green, which was just the tiniest little bit just on these two cables there and there, and then just on these uppermost corners there. Then I went and highlighted the metallic areas, and for that I used Iron Breaker. And there's not very many areas. You just got the areas like here on his bolt pistol, which I'm just going to pick out. You've got the engine on his chainsword, which I've picked out, as well as the teeth on his chainsword as well. And you also have these tiny little clasps here just on his wrist bracelet. So now that all those have been done, I've just got one area left to highlight before I get to doing the bones and other things, and that's just the little gold areas. And for that, what I'm going to use is Iron Breaker again. And I'm just going to pick out carefully around the edge of the skull here so it looks nice and shiny. There you go, that's the skull done. And then you've got this little bauble thing, whatever it is there. Next, I'm going to be doing all the bone areas on his armour. So that's like the bone details on his rib cage, his legs, and the skull that he's holding, as well as his shoulder pad and the front of his mask. Helmet, rather. So to begin with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reapply the Xandri dust. And I'm going to do that over most of this, except for where the Agrax Earthshade is collected, right in the deepest recesses, as well as leaving the underside of these ribs, the darker brown left over from the Agrax. I'm just picking them out carefully. And then for areas like the skull that's hit on his hand, the relic, and the skull that's on his shoulder pad, we can start painting in some texture on this. I'll show you on the shoulder pad one here because it's a bit easier. When we're doing this, if we thin your Xandri dust down a little bit more than you normally would, not so much that it turns it into a wash or a glaze so you lose control, just quite thin. And then when you start painting it on like areas like the forehead here, what we're going to do is sort of stipple it on, and like where the wash has added sorts of pools, we're going to try and leave that in and sort of accentuate those details, but not too much. Because this is the first stage of the highlighting. But this is where that sort of stippling motion with the brush, with the tip of the brush, comes in handy, because you can build up the impression of texture. Which we'll be back when that has been done. Once I've finished with the Xandri dust on there, I'm going to move on to a Shakti bone. And with this, we're going to start to refine the cracks and whatnot that we painted into here. And again, we're just going to do this stippling motion with it and just paint them in around it and brighten it up quite nicely. Like that. And then on the ribs, on the bones on his ribs, we use this as a sort of an edge highlight, but not quite. We're only going to paint this into the uppermost parts of it. We're going to leave the Xandri dust still visible as we go down onto them. See, like that. And with that Shakti bone done, you can really start to see the detail on his relic and on the shoulder pad and that lot start to stand out. And to finish this off, we are going to take some Screaming Skull, and we are just going to add it on the final tiny little points. So, for example, round here on his chest ribs, just going to do a little bit on the top of the centre bit like this. And then across the ribs, it's just going to be across the very top of it. We're going to do that sort of stippling motion to try and get an uneven line across there. And for areas like his shoulder pad and the skull on his relic, we're going to use this Screaming Skull to just pick out the very sharpest point. So you'd imagine across these cracks here, you put some across here to make them stand out a little bit more, so it looks like the edge of the crack, as well as the standard places to do also on the bridge of the nose just here to make that bit look more prominent, and across his eyebrow ridges there. But again, we're going to try for this uneven stippling motion with the brush so it adds that impression of texture. And then just very, very carefully, as careful as we can, pick out his teeth. And then on his helmet, again, like the very sharpest edges of things like the nose cavity there, across the ridge on the eyebrow part, the cheek part rather, and then just pick out the teeth as well. We should be back. The bone is finished. And with that final bit highlight of Screaming Skull, that is all the bone areas done. On the skull, what I've also done is the 3 studs I've painted in Ironbreaker, and the eyes just in there I've picked out in Flash Git's yellow. You don't really have to do that, but they are there, so I figured I would do that, and they do now stand out. And the next part I'm going to start highlighting is these white skulls that are on his 2 knees and his belly button, stomach, wherever. For that, what I'm going to start with is Ulthwan Grey again, but I'm going to thin this down quite a bit. I'm going to just apply this quite carefully and try and leave some of the blue in there. If we go up to where we want the colour to be strongest, like that, it'll build up. This will take a few coats because this is basically glazing the Ulthwan Grey on. You can try and build up that sort of subtle highlight that it has back when I've done that to all the skulls. As you can see, when you build up the Ulthwan Grey over a couple of coats nice and thin, you still get left with that nice bluey tint in the recesses. What we're going to do to finish these off now is we are going to jump up to some pure white, and we're just going to add some final little highlights just going around it. So you've got areas like his teeth there, just going to pick those out careful as we can. And you've got a bit just on the bridge of his nose here, Some tiny detail just at the front, again stipple, and just pick out the bits that you normally would. So like the brows, a bit of a line there, and a little bit across the top, not much. Okay, I'll be back when I've done it to all of those. Now that we've finished the white skulls, the final bit of the highlighting I'm going to do before I go to doing the freehand flames on his armour is his head. And to begin with, what I'm going to start with doing is his eyes. So it's a better idea to start doing the eyes before you do the highlighting, because this way, if you do make a bit of a mistake when you're doing them, you can a bit easier to tidy it up after. So I'm going to start by taking a bit of pure white, and for this I'm going to be using my masterclass brush from Army Painter. I'm taking a little bit of pure white, and I'm just going to try and paint this as careful as I can, just into the little eyeball. And then after that, we're going to be taking a tiny bit of Abaddon black and trying to get this just into his pupils. And the little trick is to try and line it up with the corner of his mouth. There we go. Now that we've done the eyes, we're going to start highlighting his actual face. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Pallid Witch Flesh. And this is going to be quite heavily thinned down, not quite a glaze, but quite thin down. If I put it on my fingernail, I mean, it's fairly thin down. So what we're going to do is, where this face is so really quite nicely sculpted, there's lots of prominent detail. So again, still using the masterclass brush, I'm going to start picking out all these raised areas, but leaving in the darker wash. I should be back when I finish that first layer of highlight. So after doing the Pallid Witch Flesh layer, what I've done is I've done about a 50-50 mix of pure white and Pallid Witch Flesh to make a sort of a mid-tone. And you thin this down quite a bit more so it turns into almost glazed, and you start applying this over the more raised areas. So the very top of his head like this. Try and always guide your brush into the where you want the highlight to be brightest, so on the very top of his head, like that, as well as the tops of his ears and any other areas like on his face. Like the top of his lips there is quite nice to add a little bit, the rim of his nose and his eyebrows. Next up, we are going to do his teeth and his tongue. For his teeth, you can see just a little bit of it on the top here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some Screaming Skull, still with my masterclass brush, and we are going to very carefully pick out his teeth in the top just here. And then for his tongue, I'm going to use a little bit of Mephiston Red, and just as carefully as I can, just pick that out as well. Now we're going to be doing the final part for this model, which is going to be the freehand flames. I'm going to show you on his shoulder pad here, because I think it might be a little bit easier for me to get at. So, first of all, we're going to start with Avalon Sunset. And I'm still using my masterclass brush here. Now, the longest point for the flame, if you use your reference, if you can get hold of some reference art for it, you can see how the flames sort of build up. So I'm going to start about halfway up from the center, just over halfway really, on the shoulder pad for the central bit, and just start going down in a squiggly line about there. And then build that up slowly and start working your way around building them up. Just build up some different size ones, different size flame spikes, sort of randomly sort of thing. And remember, you're not aiming to get a solid line to begin with this as well, because we are going to be building this up, just the little foundation part. So we're back when that's all blocked in, and there we go. So that is the block Avalon Sunset done to begin with. The reason I've started with this colour to start is because Avalon Sunset actually has pretty decent coverage over black. Even for a yellow, it has pretty decent coverage over it. So the next stage I'm going to go to is Uriel Yellow, and I'm going to paint that over all of the Avalon Sunset that we've done. And just block it in and just go over what we've done already. And just carefully go over filling that in. And I should be back when we've got that done. And there we have it gone over in Uriel Yellow. And the final stage for this is some Wild Rider Red. And now this, I'm going to thin down a lot. So it's like borderline, like basically a thin glaze. There you go on my fingernail, you can barely even see it on there. And what we're going to do is target this down towards the bottom. So from the tip of the fire like that, we're then going to be dragging it down to the bottom here. And don't try and, you're not going for some amazing coverage or anything to begin with. It's going to be a case of taking it and taking it a little bit down from the tip towards the base. We've got a little bit of a redder bit down the bottom. Good thing is that this dries very quickly. So now that it's dried as well, what we're going to do is we're going to go in again and just go a little bit more targeted towards the base of it, so it reinforces it down the bottom. There we have it. What's left to do now is attach his backpack. Before I go and show the final reveal of this miniature, I would once again like to thank Jason from Bring About Wargaming for sending me this model and allowing me the opportunity to open the blister pack up and paint it after I missed out back when I was 14 years old. I've had great fun doing this and I'm quite pleased with what I've managed to achieve. I hope you all enjoy watching the video. Also, in the future, there will be some more Legion of the Damned videos coming. So stay watching this space and let's see what we can do, shall we? And with that, let's go for the final grand reveal and let you see just what I've managed to do with this legendary model. And here I present to you Legion of the Damned veteran Sargent Centurius, along with his relic ready to suck the souls out of any enemies foolish enough to come anywhere near him. This model was an absolute joy to paint, and I especially enjoyed trying out the freehand on his armour with the flame work. I must admit, the freehand flame work along his chainsword was quite challenging, but I recommend people do give it a go. And if anything else, if it does go wrong and you're not happy with it, this model is metal. Strip it back and go again. It's all good. So with that, I really hope people have enjoyed this video. It's been a lot longer than I thought it was going to end up being, but still, I hope it's been worth it. There is also in the description below a link to my commission painting website, where anybody who's wanting any old Hammer stuff, 2nd edition 40k or anything else like that painted, just have a look on there for galleries and some price lists. There is also down in the description below a link to my Ko-fi account. Have a look at it if you want. There's absolutely no pressure whatsoever, but you never know, you might fancy giving us a little look at that one as well. So with that, I would just like to say thank you very much for watching, stay smiling, and keep the old hammer alive.